we're not actually focused on money. If you do a good job, the money will flow. As architects are to buildings, so we are to technology. It's a bit of a dog-eat-dog world out there.
I want to go back to your childhood.
We moved around the world a little bit. It's a cultural thing at a very, very subtle level. They're not different because they're being difficult. They're different because they're just different. We've done projects in places like Japan. I was given an opportunity to join ABC Television Australia. I came to London straight into the ITV network. I was the youngest sound supervisor in television in the UK. I don't think they were ready for me. I picked up myself and we just started again. And it's funny how you sort of fall into these things. We saw an explosion of new technologies. All of a sudden, AV is a much bigger beast. I didn't have a plan B. If it didn't work, I didn't know what I was going to do after that. But if you're not going to take any risk, why should we?
It's not about client delivery, but solving a problem for client. I still feel like you should get your hands dirty.
No amount of AI can do that.
Everything is connected, right? One thing led to another. How was that experience?
That's a really interesting question.
Hi, Peter. Welcome to the Behind the Glass Door podcast.
Thanks, Sasha. Thanks for having me.
I'll give you some context to it. So when I looked into the content available right now, especially for young professionals who are starting their career, predominantly it came across that there are two types of content the young minds are consuming. One is a lot more about motivational speaking, influencer. And while I'm a big fan of Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins, but I've seen the today's content is more about giving you a feel that you are doing something, but not really useful. The second content was more on entrepreneurship and startup journey, but I feel like it's more on a survival bias basis. Lot of glorified stories, but really tough to get the real people behind the glass door in a way. That's where this concept came in. So I knew that I have a wide network of people who I know through my jobs in India, UK, and Singapore, and that's where I thought, you know what, I should bring these guys on this podcast and talk more about them, learn more about them as well. So with that context, welcome again. How you will introduce yourself to the audience?
Okay, so I run a global consultancy firm. It's, I think the best way to describe it is the analogy is with as architects are to buildings, so we are to technology.
Right.
So we are responsible for designing technology solutions inside mainly office, a lot of work in corporate office space that delivers an outcome that is required for somebody to use it. So we're not widget designers, we're not product designers, we're solution designers. So we take other people's products and we bolt them together in such a way that delivers the outcome for the client. I say we're consultants. That means that we don't actually get our hands dirty.
Right.
So we also sit there in a governance role as well. We make sure that people actually deliver what they say they're going to deliver. They don't try and cut corners. It's a bit of a dog-eat-dog world out there.
Right.
But people always, it's very price-driven, but sometimes that price driving is at the expense of quality. So our job is to make sure that our clients, when they see that coming through, that they make informed decisions. So it's multiple. It's doing the design to fit the requirements. It's also supporting the client through the procurement process to make sure that they're not making decisions with their eyes closed.
Okay.
And then, of course, at the end of the job, it's to make sure that the contractor has actually delivered what the contractor has said they would do.
Right.
So those sort of three elements of what we do.
Got it.
And it's in that technical space.
Got it. That's quite interesting because what I've seen is a lot of time clients don't have these expertise in house. So we need someone like someone to come as a consultant, maybe for a short term, and deliver on behalf of client, right? So there is a value add to it. But I want to go back to your childhood and understand your journey from there and how it's all connected to what you are doing now.
Yeah, so my childhood was quite an interesting. So we, as a family, we moved around the world a little bit. We spent grew up in the UK, but as a family, we lived in Canada for a couple of years, back to the UK, and then down to Australia, which is where I ended up settling. I suppose my introduction into what I do today is really formulated through a decision that my mother made to put me into a school that specialized in music.
Right.
It was a boarding school, and there wasn't a very large school. It was a specialist music school,
Mhm.
and I got in there. I don't know to this day how I got in, but I did get in, and and that has sort of sat with me at a very foundational level. That sort of music quality, the purity of the sound, and that has sort of grown up through me as I sort of went through school. I knew that I was never going to be good enough as a musician, and I've let that side of it definitely drop. But the other side of my interest, which came from probably my father's side, is the physics and the engineering side. So I have been able to blend the two of that sort of appreciation of the purity of sound, particularly it's come from my musical background, and my insatiable thirst for understanding the widgets and the gadgets and how they work and what they do, and consequently, that has really shaped how I've lived my life, I think, is probably the best way to put it. So much of what I do in my career, I probably would do even if I wasn't being paid for it.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you mentioned you lived across various places, right? And something relatable here, like I moved from India to Singapore to UK, and sometime at back of my mind, I think, am I doing injustice to my kids, for example? But what's it like? You have gone through this journey. Does it help you uh, living at different places? Does it make you understand more about client, their background? Do you think you would have done the same if you are raised in, let's say, one location?
That's difficult to answer because I haven't been raised in one location. So, but I think what it has done is it's given me an awareness of different cultures around the world. And as we'll talk later about how we've expanded around the world,
Right.
I think one of the really important things is to understand that what is acceptable in, say, the UK is not necessarily an acceptable way of doing things to someone like India,
Right.
and it's again different in Singapore. We've seen processes that are quite commonplace here in the UK not translating well into Australia.
Correct.
And we find that just because they're English speaking and the banter and the cricket and everything else that goes along, they think they know each other really well. But when it comes to actually doing projects and executing business, they do handle them differently. So it's not it's a cultural thing. It's a cultural thing at a very, very subtle level. So we've done projects in places like Japan, Korea, India, of course, the US. They all operate differently, and I think part of my background of traveling and living in different countries and having that broader experience has given me an understanding that people are different, and therefore, they're not different because they're being difficult. They're different because they're just different. And
Yes.
you still apply the same fundamentals, but in a slightly different way.
Yeah. And ultimately, people do businesses with people, right? So it all comes down to that. I mean, of course, you need to have a good service, product, and everything else. But I think it's people talking to people and getting the needs fulfilled.
And particularly in an environment where you're providing a service rather than a product. If you buy a product, it goes on the table compared with 6 others. And if yours is best and it's a good price, people will buy it. When you're delivering a service, though, how do you judge whether that service is good? You don't know whether it's good until the project is finished.
Right.
So yes, people then, can I get on with this person? Are they going to fit into my team? Is it going to work? Are they reasonable? Are they aggressive? Are they defensive? Are they pliable? Are they compliant? Everybody's different on that spectrum, and not every face fits every project.
Right.
We'll bid for projects where we just come away thinking we're not the right fit for this project. We're not the right fit for this company, and we come away from others. We're a perfect fit for this organization.
Yeah.
So.
You mentioned something about projects and how client come to know once the project is done. Um, so if you look at your career, I think there are different phases to it, as everybody should have. But can you walk us through all the things you did, let's say after college, maybe something on formal education, and then what you did, your journey in last, 20 plus years?
Yeah, 20 years would be generous, actually. It's more than 20 years. So I finished school in Australia, and I went to university in Australia. I did engineering, but I didn't finish my degree. I was given an opportunity to join ABC Television Australia, so it's the ABC's equivalent to the BBC.
Yeah.
And in those days, they had quite a rigorous 3-year training program, which was a combination of theory and practical work, which is great because I'm quite a hands-on sort of person, so I enjoyed that a lot. I came out of that, and that television. I went in specializing in sound for the reasons I gave you earlier,
Right.
and I did a lot of fantastic work, and I worked with a lot of very, very good quality people. And I was based in Perth, and we were it still is an isolated city in a very large country. And we don't have the benefit of head office. You know, when something comes up, we just have to find a way of making it work.
Right.
So that sort of can-do attitude, and let's find a way. Let's have a plan B. Let's have a plan C. Let's find a way of making it work. That's been drilled into me from a very young age, and that's something which I carry forward with me even today.
Right.
I left the ABC after my training. I came to London because anybody who works in television, certainly on the 50 hertz side of the world, wants to work for the BBC.
Yeah.
And
so which year is this?
This is late 80s. So this is 89, 90.
Okay.
So I came to the UK. I went straight into the ITV network at the age of 22, I think I was. I was the youngest sound supervisor in television in the UK. Normally, you don't get that role until you're 30. So they put me in it, and I just can do. Yep, we'll do that.
Right.
So I did it. I left there and I went to satellite television. And then I ended up, when that satellite television station got merged with Sky TV, we were all made redundant. So we all ended up going to do stuff. I did stuff at the BBC on freelance. I did stuff back at ITV again. And then I sort of got pulled into corporate live events, so product launches and things like that.
Right.
So even though I was in sound, I was somehow found myself handling all the video side.
Right.
So I was going in there, multiple cameras lining up everything, making it all work, and they were going, "Oh, you seem to know what you're doing." I'm going, "Oh yeah, okay." That's what happens when you work in television; these things rub off onto you. And then I got a phone call from somebody asking me if I would be interested in a role to look after a video conference system.
Okay.
So I had no idea what a video conference system was. But I walked in there and it was racks and racks of equipment, very large television screens. And I sort of said, "How much is this worth?" And they said, "Oh, it's about $250,000 worth of video conferencing system, just one room." Yeah. So that will make you laugh today because, it's free on Teams. And that was my introduction into sort of corporate AV. And from there, I spent a couple of years working in that organization for some fairly senior people, managing things. I did some satellite links back to the US for conferences, and then I started up a small company, which has grown into a big company, and it's still going today. I'm very pleased to hear it's still going today. Right. And that was a vendor. That was the sort of company that I spoke about earlier, who would deliver the projects.
Right.
So that's what we did. Through the latter part of that company's life with me, I ended up doing some direct contract work with third parties. So one of them was Grand Metropolitan, which is now Diageo, and I delivered, I project managed the delivery of a number of video conference rooms around the world for them. And then I also, at that point, was starting to get to a point where I was getting involved in contracting to one of the big banks in the city as well. So I went in on that basis. I spent a couple of years with them, and at the same time, I extracted myself from the company that I'd started. So basically a management buyout.
Okay.
But the introduction into the consulting world was done through that banking engagement, which is quite interesting. I actually sort of understood how that worked a bit. I then left the bank, took a few months off, and then started with an acoustic consultancy company in London. Went in as their sort of AV or technical specialist, and we were working on some big projects in the city. I don't think they were ready for me. I probably wasn't quite ready for them.
Right.
Quite a traditional firm. And, I think we just agreed to disagree on a few things. And so I left and started what is now Hewshott.
Okay. And this is which year?
This is, this would be 2002.
Okay.
2002.
Right.
Yeah. So I started Hewshott in 2002. And with their blessing, they said, "Look, we can't do these jobs without you. So continue to do that, and we'll have an arrangement," which was fine. But it also became the starting point for the company. So that sort of gave me the impetus to get things going.
Yeah.
And it's funny how you sort of fall into these things. You don't really do it by design. I did it by accident.
Right.
And
but if you look back, I think everything is connected, right? In a way, one thing led to another.
Yes.
And there is so much to unpack here. But I want to understand on the middle part where you mentioned you had an exit from a business. How was that experience?
Probably a bit traumatic at the time. It wasn't really what I was sort of, I didn't plan on it. I didn't expect it.
Yeah.
I think at the time there was a lot of things going on, domestically as well, which I think were also taking up a lot of my time and finding it quite difficult to juggle everything that was going on at the same time. And I think probably for my own peace of mind and frankly for theirs as well, because I think I probably wasn't the easiest person to work with at that particular point in time. I think it was just right to say, look, let's just call it a day.
Right.
Basically did a buyout and we just sort of, I picked up myself and we just started again.
Yeah.
That's how that sort of panned out.
Right.
But extracting yourself from a business is not easy.
Yeah.
But I think in a leadership, you sometimes have to recognize when you're not adding any value anymore. You get to a point where you're saying, actually, I think the business deserves somebody better than me to take it from this stage to the next stage. Because, I've sort of worked out that my skill is in that sort of startup and an embryonic phase and spotting an idea. That's sort of but I don't know that I'm the right person to go from an established business to a bigger established business. And it takes different mindset to do that. And that's probably not me. And you have to be honest enough about that. And so I've got my usefulness and that next stage isn't where I'm going to be best at.
Right. But that's really courageous. I mean, one thing what I've seen in the corporate world is people suffer a lot to do the succession planning. A lot of time they hold back to their old selves, and as a result, they don't grow. They're just stuck on a certain stage. Did exiting the business help you building Hewshott in a way that you now know you have a better clarity on what you want to build, how you want to take it ahead?
A little bit, yeah. I haven't really thought about it like that, but now you mention it, that's probably true. When I exited the previous company, things were happening around me. It was expanding quite quickly, and I was struggling to sort of see A, the bigger picture, B, how it should pan out. And bear in mind, I was 33.
Right.
I hadn't done this before. I didn't have a clue what was going on. I was sort of just, I want to say I'm making it up as I was going, but it wasn't quite like that, but it wasn't far off it. But there were some other people in the business who did have a bit more experience than me. And it was clear to me that they were probably the right people to lead it. Now, I may not have necessarily agreed with how they wanted to do it or the direction they wanted to go, but that doesn't mean that it was wrong. It just means that it was just my opinion that was not aligned with their opinion. So you just say, look, you take it over and you run it and just buy me out and, and you've got a ready-made company and off you go. Right. And that's exactly what happened. So I've got no regrets about that.
Yeah.
At the time, I felt as if I was being a bit victimized, I suppose. But looking back on it now, it was probably the best thing that could happen to me.
True.
To be truthful.
True.
Yeah. And so, now, 22 years, 23 years later in the Hewshott world, I sort of sit back and think, am I seeing history repeating itself? Do I now get to the point where I can only take the company so far and it's now time for somebody else to do that?
Yeah.
All these things are churning around in my mind. And we'll see what happens.
But tell me more about Hewshott Journey. Right? You started in 2002. Then what? You based it in Australia?
No, so it was here. It was in the UK, yeah. So it's just down the road in Farnham from here. Right. And as I said, I think when I finished with that acoustic consultancy practice, we still had some projects on that they needed to do. Right. So that was like the embryonic start of the company. Right. There was some money coming in from the work that I was doing, but it was just me. Yeah. So we started in the UK, and at the time, and this is basically as an an audiovisual consultancy practice. At the time, there was probably 2 or 3, maybe 4 other AV consultants in the sort of London area. So we didn't have a lot of competition, I suppose, in one respect, but also there wasn't that maturity where it was demanded that AV was needed. Right. So it's sort of supply and demand. If the demand is there, people will rise up and supply to it. True. But the demand wasn't there at that level. Fortunately for me and for Hewshott, we saw an explosion of new technologies coming onto the scenes in the early 2000s. Right. A lot of the beginnings of AV over IP starting to come through. People pushing the boundaries of what's possible, which I really enjoy watching that happen. And all of a sudden, competent AV solutions became an important part of a corporation's communication strategy. Right. Okay. And video conferencing was starting to become mainstream, and all these allied services were starting to come in. Digital signage comes in. Right. All of a sudden, AV is a much bigger beast. True. And traditionally, the client might have said, we use this product and that's what we want in our meeting rooms. And now it was a bigger affair.
Okay.
So you fast forward a few years, and we started in London. We did some good work for some people. We've created some podcast studios, which you believe in 2003.
Wow.
2004 for a German investment bank. But that was in Asia Pac. So they said, we want to set up these studios. We set them up in London because I've got a team in London, I know what I'm doing. But I want to set them up in Singapore. I want to set up in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Japan. So me and one other in the company, we went out there and we organized it all and we commissioned all the work and got it all up and running, and created these little sort of podcast places where trading bankers could go in, just do a piece to camera for 3 minutes, and then post it to clients, that sort of thing. So very forward thinking.
Sure.
And that was the beginning of the start of our journey of going into Asia Pac.
Right. Okay.
So soon after that, we were asked by the same organization, actually, if we would be interested in supporting them for a new project they were doing in Singapore. We said we would. And then this is where the sort of startup for me comes back in and go, right, so how are we going to do this? We need to get a company set up in Singapore. We need to get the structure right. We need to open some bank accounts. We need to do some paperwork. We need to get solicitors to do all this, that, and the other. So all that sort of stuff that I like doing to get things set up. We did that in Singapore, and that was in 2005.
Right.
So 20 years this year is our Singapore
20 years
anniversary.
this
Yeah.
And now it's, of course, a global company. You have offices in 10 plus.
Yeah, so from Singapore, we went into Hong Kong.
Yes.
By that time, a decent portion of our revenue. So bear in mind, when we started in Singapore, we were the only really people who did what we did in Singapore.
Right.
And all the big banks were saying, oh, what's going on around there? I want some of this. So we ended up with about 6 or 8 major banks engaging us to do exactly the same work for them that we were doing for the bank that effectively launched us in Singapore.
Right.
So we were really, really busy and a lot of work. Off the back of that, we were asked to go to Hong Kong by an American investment bank to do their building. And then soon after that, they also asked us to go and do India.
Right.
So by then, we had a big portion of our footprint, of our revenue footprint in the Asia Pacific region.
Yeah.
And so I chose, I obviously spoke to my wife about it briefly, but we returned back to Australia as a family.
Right.
So we moved back in 2009 and established ourselves in Perth. And we did that because, number one, I lived in Perth, but number two, it's in the same time zone as Singapore and Hong Kong. So it was easy to keep track of everything. And we haven't looked back since then. So we've been in Australia now for 16 years, and I also started the office in Perth as well. So that's been going for 16 years.
Right.
And India, and we stopped at that point. Yeah. We didn't do any more. That's enough. So it became a monster in the end of trying to manage it and try to keep it going. It had its pluses, it has its minuses.
Yeah.
Some things fell apart a little bit. It's like spinning plates. You've just got to keep them going.
But what I like about your journey is maybe you did not realize that time, but looking back, everything looks like a complete story. I want to bring your attention on a lot of startups which are coming up today. There is a common theme saying start early, get the funding, make it big, and directly jump into it. While I'm a big believer of entrepreneurship, but I still feel like you should get your hands dirty, get the experience, get the knowledge, and then jump into it. What's your take on it? Like,
I tend to agree with you. I think that when I did what I did, I didn't have a plan B. Okay. If it didn't work, I didn't know what I was going to do after that.
Right.
It was a lot of risk, for want of a better. And I don't even, by today's standards, if you started me today and say, would you go and do this? I go, probably no. Probably I wouldn't. It's very risky, and what's going to happen, and but when you're a bit younger and you don't have those major responsibilities,
Right.
To be concerned about, you're really focused on the glass half full. You go, yep, I can make this work. Yep, there's an opportunity there. And I've spoken to a couple of people, and they've shown some interest, and they're going to give us a contract. So it just snowballs. It starts off with something, and it gets bigger and bigger. Would I have been able to do that straight out of school? Absolutely not.
Right.
No. So what I have brought into my startup is 7 or 8 years of work, of understanding how technology works, understanding how people engage with, so working in an acoustic consultancy practice for 12 months has taught me about systems and process and, fee proposals and defining scope and looking for people who are departing from that. And that's all valuable lessons that you learn that you bring in when you start up. So I came in with a tool bag of experience and knowledge,
Right.
which I could then apply in some way to the work that I was doing and still continue to learn as I was doing it.
True.
So, but that's my journey. Everybody's journey is different. And I think everybody has that, their own take on this and how it works. But I didn't have a backup. I didn't have a plan B. Now, if my children were saying, "Oh, I think I'm going to do this now," I would be saying to them, "You need to go and get some experience. All right, you need to go and work for somebody in this area. You need to cut your teeth a little bit. You need to make some mistakes. I mean, you're making some mistakes on somebody else's watch, which is not obviously the right thing to do, but at the end of the day, they're employed. Okay, so they understand how to do things. If they then come to me after working for 5 or 6 years and go, right, and I think I've seen spotted opportunity here, and I'll go, yeah, that's a really good idea. Right. You've got some track record, you've got some experience, you know what you're doing, then do it.
Right. That's more of a, I won't say calculative, but educative risk. Like I know where I'm getting into, and the chances of success I feel will be more.
Yeah, there probably will be more. But what I think is harder to articulate is when somebody has a passion for something. And I've sort of spent a lot of time in that performing arts space. Performing arts people are passionate about their stuff. They don't think necessarily about the consequences of it. They just want to perform, or they want to deliver, or they want to do something to create something really, really good and really special. And that's quite hard for people who would be funding it to really understand.
Right.
Because it's so much dependent on your creativity. Is it going to match what the market is looking for?
Right.
So it's a much tougher gig, I think, to do that in that creative space.
Right.
But not impossible.
True. You mentioned something on funding, right? I have this question, and if it is confidential, don't answer. But I see a lot of celebration around getting money raised nowadays. Going to VCs, Angel, and getting money raised. It's equivalent of now I'm successful because I raised the money. Did you ever fall into that thinking? Probably fall is not right word, but did you think over, I need to raise money? Should I raise money during your journey in Hewshott or earlier?
Yeah. Okay. So I wouldn't call it raising money.
Yeah.
But when Hewshott started, I knew that I wouldn't have the cash coming in to cover the wages of the people that I needed to do the job.
Yes.
So I went to the bank. The UK banking system is really good because as a startup, you can have your funding, your initial funding, guaranteed by the government.
True.
Okay, so they have a loan guarantee scheme, which if the business case stacks up, and the bank would ordinarily lend that money, but the person who they're lending it to doesn't have the security, then the government will step in and provide that security to the bank.
Right.
But the bank has to take a risk on, I think, 10% or 15% of it.
Okay.
So the government's saying, look, we'll give you most of it, but you've got to take a risk on this. So if you're not going to take any risk, why should we? Sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I used that scheme to give me some cash to start up, and that's the beginning of the Hewshott world.
Right.
Fast forward to last year.
But just to ask, there is no equity you passed on. It's more like a loan with the government security.
It is a loan, but the government guarantees it. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Fast forward to last year, sorry. I did secure some funding to help an expansion plan for both Singapore and Perth.
Right.
At that point, we just used our house as security because the training system doesn't allow that without, and we use that, and that's fine. So that's okay. So those are the only 2 times I've actually raised any funding to help stabilize or expand the business.
Right.
I've never gone down the angel investor route, and I've never gone down the venture capitalist route. And I suppose I should ask myself why I've never done that.
Yeah.
And I think after your question, and I think the answer is just at a personal level. I'm just a little bit reluctant to allow somebody else to start getting involved in starting to tell me how to run the business.
Right.
So our business is very strong on being focused on delivery, work ethic, all of those sorts of things. We're not actually focused on money. We should be, And but we have a theory that if you do a good job,
I think you have been modest.
oh, well, I have a theory: if you do a good job, the money will flow,
Yeah.
and if you do a bad job, the money won't flow. So your litmus test is: if I've got no money in the bank, I must be doing a bad job,
Right.
or I'm doing a bad job at negotiating deals, and you learn about that as well. But we've expanded our business organically.
Right.
So every office that we've opened has been opened out of cash flow, out of reserves, out of robbing people to pay somebody else, and just all that sort of stuff. Just working hard, so you don't have to go and employ somebody else to do something. You go, well, I could do that, so we'll do that and save the salary, and we can use that money to pay for that over there. I don't know whether people inside the business have really realized how much effort goes into doing that. But what we've got is a business which is effectively debt-free,
Yeah.
which I think is really important, and we own it.
Yeah.
Nobody else has got a finger in it.
Yeah.
So angel investors and venture capitalists, in the same way that they are bank loans or anybody, they're getting involved because they want a return on their money.
Right.
And their only judgment about their success, ultimately, is whether they've made some money back on what they've done.
Right.
Now, I do know a few angel investors, some of the personal friends of mine, and whilst they'll say, yeah, look, we'll put in some money into this one. It sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to get it back or not.
Right.
But they spread their risk by going into multiple ones, and some will do very well, and some will maybe not so well, and maybe they'll lose on one of them.
Right.
But overall, they'll be in front. So overall, there's still money. Is a driving factor behind it.
Yeah.
But you can understand that because that's all they've got to offer. So that's the only measurement they can do is say, well, do I get a return on what I've invested in?
True.
Because I'm not invested in the return that the company is going to get, the feel-good factor, or the reputational factor that they're going to get. That you can't translate that into money.
Right.
That's just trading and reputation and all those other things that you do as a business and a business owner. So I've avoided it because I don't want a business to be focused on money.
Right. Right. Well, that's interesting. I mean, I have a couple of questions linked here. One is, have you looked into strategic partnership or strategic funding? So, for example, nowadays concept is companies like Colgate are investing into a lot of businesses which go into a bathroom so that they capture the full space. So they will invest in startups in that area. So have you thought of that kind of partnership slash investment?
I'll answer that question with a question in a roundabout way. We are starting to see in our market, in the market of project delivery market, bear in mind we also do acoustics as well as technology. We're starting to see a consolidation of the bigger players in the world.
Right.
Saying, okay, I'm not just a project management company anymore. I'm a project management company that owns a firm of architects. I own a firm of M&E engineers or consultants. I own a landscape architect. I own a signage. I own a lift consultant. I own a catering consultant. So what they're saying is that they're going to a client and going, we're a one-stop shop. We can do everything for you. And the client's going, fantastic. That's really good. I'm really pleased with that. Other clients are going, I don't want your architect because I want my architect. I actually want to go out to market. Yes, we can put your architects on the list, but I want to go and see who else is out there. So I've often wondered in the consultancy space, and we are seeing it, some consultants have been mopped up, is probably a best word, or merged with architectural type firms or others. I've often wondered whether we're going to see some more consolidation about that, and how a company like ours could be seen to be a fertile source of work for people further down the food chain.
True.
If that happens to us, then you won't find me in charge of Hewshott anymore. Because one of the things that I'm very passionate about is our independence.
True.
We're all engineers. There's 30, I think last count, there's 37 or 38 of us now.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of those people are independently minded, can think for themselves, quality engineers who don't need to be bossed around by manufacturers or resellers or anything like that. They're perfectly capable of making their own minds up. Thank you very much. Yeah. So when you start to become a part of a bigger picture, where your ultimate paymaster is got a vested interest in investing in you because they want you to specify their product.
Right.
Now we're not an independent voice. Now we cannot, hand on heart, sit in front of a client and provide honest advice because that advice is influenced by the people who's further above us. Yes.
Is it because there is a problem of plenty? I mean, Hewshott is a known name, has a reputation, but there are a lot of mom and pop shops which are coming up. And does it become for a client, it's a problem of plenty? I don't know which one to choose. Is that the reason why consolidation is happening?
No, I think consolidation is happening because I think people are opportunists, and I think the manufacturing, whether it's manufacturers or that sort of project delivery process with bigger firms of architects, bigger firms of M&E consultants, they'll see, oh, we've got this whole client, we're doing everything for them, but we're not doing the AV.
Yeah.
So the AV contractor consultants come on board, and they're not one of ours. We can't control them. They're coming up with things which make us work a bit harder. And obviously, we're trying to stream back to the money again. We're trying to streamline things. So let's go and bring in an AV consultant into our fold.
Right.
So that when we're bidding for work, we can actually say, oh, we can do AV, we can do acoustics, we can do IT, we can do theatre.
Right.
And, the clients are going, you're from procurement, and you know what it's like.
Yeah.
The client's going, oh God, it's so much easier just to give them the job because it's just one contract and it's just one supplier and I haven't got to mess about with all this. And the downside of that is, are you getting the best value for your money? Are you getting the solution that you want? Is that multidisciplinary consultant, do they have the in-house skills to be able to turn around and go, no, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do it that way because they've recruited the right people.
Right.
So I'm not saying they do or they don't. I'm just saying that these are questions I would be asking if I was on the client side, being faced with a very large multidisciplinary company who I'm going to give everything to.
Yeah.
So eggs in one basket type of approach. Now, they say one throat to choke. I've got you by this, and you will deliver, but why give yourself that problem in the first place? It's you would know from a procurement point of view.
I think there are rational to both sides, right? I see merit in going to one supplier who does everything, and at the same time, I see a rational to go for the best in class. So doesn't matter if I have 10, but everyone is best in class. So they work together. You need a good project manager or good client side person to bridge all the gaps. But I've seen both sides and I know why they're doing it in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, so, to answer your question about the consolidation, it is happening, particularly and smaller, the one-man bands, the people who are one or two people who do very good work. There's no question about it. But they're a very easy target for an M&E consultant to say, come on, just come and be part of us. We'll give you a nice job, a nice office, and you haven't got to work out of your spare room anymore. And all of a sudden it sort of looks nice and easy. And then, these big companies are, some of them are PLCs, so their obligation is to shareholders, so they need to generate a return.
Yeah.
So do you question, does some of that creativity and some of that opportunity to be creative, does it get pushed down the importance
Is
a
the
little bit?
creative versus commercial?
And the commercial is because we've got to make some money, and and I have people in the business who have come from large consultancy firms, and what they like about us is that we're not sitting there money focused all the time. What they miss is the nice office with a decent coffee machine and the view out the window and the sort of safety in numbers that you get with bigger companies.
Yeah.
And this is what comes down to the individual. What makes you tick? What do you want to do? I don't know that I could ever really work for a big organization. I've been doing this too long now to feel that I don't think I'm right for them, and I don't think they're right for me.
Yeah. But you mentioned about people joining from other consulting firm to you. What's the approach you have for recruiting people? Or because our audience is more young guys who are starting their journey in profession, what's the advice you have for them, or what talent you are looking for?
I think I think I can only speak from Hewshott's point of view, of course, but I think the thing that we're really keen on is pedigree.
Right.
Pedigree, independently minded. We like to be challenged. We don't like people who just come in and do what they're told to do because they're told to do it. I want people to come into my business and I want them to think about what they've been asked to do and then say, have you thought about doing it this way? I mean, my door is always open in the office, where I sit, And there's never a time when somebody hasn't walked past it thinking they could just pop in and ask,
Yeah.
you know, you asked me to do this, but I actually think we could do it this way a little bit better. What do you think? And I go, actually, that's a really good idea. Yeah, good thinking. Well done. That's fantastic. Let's push on with that. That's a great opportunity.
Right.
So my advice is to be yourself, be individual, accept that you have to work within a business community, and accept that, you know, life isn't always the way you want it. There's always going to be a give and take, but don't ever lose sight of the things that make you what you are, and see if you can find a role that epitomizes what you are, rather than trying to find, trying to make yourself fit into a role. Try and find a role that fits into you.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the success of people in their work is because they are working in an area that they're passionate about. How many times, I mean, you've done this when you were, you know, working probably before your procurement days when you're an engineer, you get stuck into something, you really enjoy it, and before you know it, the day's gone and you just don't know where the time has gone.
Yeah.
That to me is a sign that somebody is in the right job.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I can remember my consulting days, and we used to get into an issue, solve it, and spend days and nights and come up with something. And we all feel nice about, okay, it's not about client delivery, but solving a problem for client
It's satisfying.
was like a passion. And we used to take a lot of pride in it, that, okay, there was an issue, but we fixed it. And this is how we did it.
Yeah.
But what you have seen is missing in let's say new recruits, or new talent when you see.
This is a really interesting problem, and this is not a problem which is unique to us. I think this is I saw a survey, I saw a report a year or two back, which was talking about the evolution of people in their 20s.
Right.
So when I was growing up, you know, usually in your 20s, you got married and you bought a house and you had children, and that pretty much set you on the path for a solid job.
Yeah.
You know, because you need the
loan
money.
which comes with the house. So,
Sorry?
so the loan which
The
comes
mortgage,
with the
exactly.
house, the
Yeah,
mortgage,
yeah.
right?
So that
And it's the biggest motivator to stay in the job and do it.
yeah, because you've got a mortgage to pay for, and you've got to put food on the table, and children aren't cheap. So that was what we did, you know, in our 20s. This is going back to the 90s.
Yeah.
And that's what, you know, you look back on history, that's what the vast majority of people did. You go forward to today, that mid-20s window is now 33, 34.
True.
Okay, so now the people of my children, my youngest is 19, my eldest is 27, and all of them are out exploring the world.
Right.
They're going off, they're getting jobs, they're not settling into relationships. They've got multiple friends. When they go off on holiday, they go off with 3 or 4 of them, not just one person. So, and that's how they function in their lives. And that's a product of evolution of where we are today. So what does that mean from a business point of view? It means that you don't have people that need to pay a mortgage and need to pay for children. You have people that are renting, that are, a little bit more transitory than we were. So when they come for a job, if they don't like it, they just leave.
Yeah, true.
And they go off and they do another job. And they don't like that, they leave. They get to their sort of low to mid 30s, and all of a sudden, oh, okay, I'm in a relationship. I've got children. I'm going to get married. I've got a mortgage. I now need a proper job.
Right. Right.
So what we got is a 6 or 7 year skills gap of people who are prepared to stick in the job.
Right.
Now, that's a bell curve.
Yeah.
Of course, there are going to be people who do comply with what we were doing in our 20s, and you've got people at the other end who will never do it, even in their 50s. So, but what I'm saying is that has shifted a little bit forward. So we've now got a gap, not a skills gap, but a recruitment gap of 4 to 5 years, where we thought we'd get somebody and they're going to be settled, to now, we're having to continuously do that ongoing recruiting and training and education cycle that happens, when you do it once at 20 something, we're doing it again and again and again. So I used to look at CVs that came in, and if people had, multiple jobs before they were 30, I'd go, okay, there's a problem here. But actually I've had to adjust my thinking, going, okay, so this is acceptable. This is a new normal. you normally get graduates coming in or people coming in who are in their mid-20s who have had multiple jobs because that's what you do in your university, and you travel, and that's fine, absolutely to be expected. But that trend is continuing now through their 20s,
Right.
up to their early 30s. And
Is
it's
it
not-
also
and it's not-
because as the new talent which is coming, I feel genuinely they're a bit more smarter. They're open to question authority, saying, why should I do it this way? They're more courageous. So, in a way, in the corporate framework, they get uncomfortable saying, this is too slow for me. I could change this in a year. Is it because of that as well?
That's a really interesting question. I think as leaders, my age, in my 50s, we have to be mindful that these people are coming in with new ideas
Right.
and with ideas, and we shouldn't be shutting them down. We should be giving them a platform to vocalize them. I mean, we should be listening to them, because what they're doing is they're reflecting the way that things are today. Now, will they need a bit of guidance and need a bit of support? Absolutely, they will, yes. But should we take a lesson from them? Yes, we should. Should we be applying our standards, going back, to the mid-90s,
Right.
to the youth and the emerging people in business today? No, we should not. We should be listening to what they're doing, and we should be saying, okay, you've got some fantastic, let me apply a little bit of governance over what you're doing so that when you do it, you're successful at it, rather than charging off and making a mistake and coming back with your tail between your legs and trying it and then another one. So a little bit of structure.
Rails.
Yeah, a little bit of guide
to
rails.
work on.
Yeah. But don't stifle the enthusiasm or the appetite for doing something different. I was talking to actually one of our UK clients in the higher education sector, and a lot of the work that he's doing is not traditional at all. He's giving people almost blank spaces, and they're in the university that they work in has got a lot of performing arts in it, a lot of media arts, a lot of podcasting, and a lot of this sort of thing. And rather than saying, this is the equipment you're going to use, stand in front of this mic, stand in front of that camera, do that, he's saying, here's the equipment on the floor and here's a blank room. What are you going to do with it?
Right.
So encouraging a little bit of that out of the box thinking. And what that does, of course, it gives them ownership of the outcome as well, because they're creating something technically as well as, editorially that they're responsible for. And they feed that back in, well, that didn't work, but this is working really well. And what they're bringing in is their new way of working, their new way of communicating. And the university is responding to that by listening to their needs and giving them solutions that will work for them.
Right.
So, and I think, we look at in the corporate sector, teams as, COVID, for all of the bad things about COVID, what has it taught us? It's taught us that we can continue running projects over Teams.
Absolutely.
We don't need to.
I think it was a digitalization boost which we much needed.
We did. And I think a lot of people were sitting on that technology nervous about it.
Exactly.
But then it happened, and we always had absolutely no choice. If you don't adopt this, you're going to fall behind really, really quickly, because, even though we're all locked up at home, projects still need to be delivered. We still need to carry on. These buildings are not going to pay for themselves.
Right.
And so, and that's great. So what's happened now, and we do this a lot, is even within Perth. I mean, Perth is a small city. It's about the size of Reading. And we'll have meetings for projects where we're all within a mile of each other, but we don't go to the office.
True.
We don't do it. We just do it over Teams.
Yeah.
Because it's convenient. And we can do this. It doesn't matter whether the project is, a mile down the road or 1,000 miles away or in a different country. We can still do the same work.
True. And speaking of new technology, I think no podcast in current days are without the AI topic, right? I mean, I'm a big fan of AI. I use it quite a lot in my personal space, but also exploring something in my work area as well. Um, does it have any impact in your industry? Do you see focus getting shifted?
Yeah, we are. So this is an interesting one, because when people are responding to tenders that we issue out, we're just in the basis of putting some paragraphs in our tenders that ask them to declare whether any of their response has been generated by AI. Okay. When you are fitting out a major building and you've got people on site plugging things together, getting things to work, no amount of AI can do that. That's a human part.
Right.
Okay. But if their response is generated by AI, that's not a response which is tailored to their company and tailored to their ability to deliver. So we do put something in there that says they need to declare what portion of their proposal has been generated by AI.
Right.
Okay. And if they don't tell us the truth, we can run it through the systems to actually check whether that's the case or not. And I think this comes back to this honesty thing, this honesty in governance. Nobody minds if you do it, but just declare it so that we know. Okay. And then we can put it into perspective. Because if we see that you've written paragraphs on AI about something technical, how do we know that we actually know what you're talking about?
Correct. Unless it is generated by something, the technology which you have invested in. There are a lot of startups are coming in this area where they help your company to bring to the AI platform, and then it's educative, right? You give the prompt, you give the inputs, so it's your own proprietary which you have.
Yeah, but how many people actually do that?
Exactly.
And where do you draw the line?
It's generative AI, which is between ChatGPT.
Yeah. So AI is really, really interesting. I was at the big industry conference and event in Barcelona just last week, and the AI is the phrase of the decade at the moment. It's really coming on, and the way that they are utilizing AI to be productive and constructive for project work is very, very interesting. It's really good, actually. There's some really, really clever stuff out there. And I think we're going to see that coming into the mainstream of what we're doing in the future quite quickly. Do we use AI in our work? I'd like to say we don't, but I'm pretty sure we do without me realizing it. I was talking to my youngest sister, who is a landscape architect, and she said that she uses it. And I was like, really? You use it? You're an architect. But she said, yeah, but what I do is I get it to sort out some reports, sort of generate a report for me. But she said, then I will go in and I'll edit it. But it does all that heavy lifting. I then have got to pay, a junior architect or a researcher to go off and get that information and put it into a report for me. It does that for me. So I use it to do that. But she said, no, I would never send out a report, which is just a ChatGPT report. Exactly. Straight out. No.
That makes sense. I think the use cases, what we are also saying is, like, for example, in your case, you get a lot of proposals. You can put it in the agent. The agent is Word of 2025, where you create small chat box kind of setup. So you can put all these proposal and tell AI to give you a comparative summary. And a lot of time it gives you correct input, which makes you easy to analyze the proposal. You don't make decision by it, but it gives you a good summary of, okay, which supplier is giving you best value in your proposal. So that's something I've seen.
Yeah, we haven't looked at. I mean, I think some people in the business are looking at that more deeply than I am. I mean, this comes back to what I was saying at the beginning. The business is probably starting to head in a different direction, and that leadership needs to be somebody other than me for that to be embraced and successful, rather than sort of accidentally falling into it and getting tricked up. And I think that's the clever part about using this sort of AI technology and predictive technology, which is what it is, is to have it tailored to be beneficial to what you're trying to do. I think if you just sit back, let AI do everything, and just wait for the dollar signs to come in, that's really not going to work.
Exactly. I think I agree with you. I think it needs education,
because people see through it.
Yeah.
People see through it. Yeah. And I've seen CVs come across my desk, and I say to myself, he hasn't written the CV, or she hasn't written the CV. This is a bodge job, so it goes in the bin. And which is a crying shame, because they actually might be really good.
Exactly.
But that's the way they portray themselves to me. So I make a judgment based on what I see in front of me. I can't look at all these people, 100 people applying for a job. I can't interview them all and actually see if they really do know what they're talking about.
Right.
And it's a bell curve thing, isn't it? Some people will get trapped in this.
Yeah.
Some people will actually get through the system. So good people will not get through because it hasn't worked for them. Other people who have been very polished at generating the right result will get through, and then you realize they don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
So yeah, nothing is black and white, as I'm sure you understand.
So, I mean, last couple of questions. I'm mindful of your time. Is which industry you're bullish on right now? So AI is one, your own industry is one. But if somebody is coming out of a good college, looking to start something, what will be one industry you'll tell this is going to go up?
About 4 or 5 years ago, I attended a seminar with one of the management consulting firms. I forget which one it is, like Bain & Co. or something like that.
Okay.
And they showed a prediction that from around about now to early 20s, early 2030, 2031, 32 or something like that, we will see robotics take over the role of middle income earners. And we're seeing it happening already. So anybody who's so the difficulty is with this is that you're going to then start getting this sort of big chunk of labor work being done by something other than people. So how do those people earn a living? Either they move up into the sort of the top end of the market, which AI won't touch, or they move down to the bottom end of the market, which AI won't touch. So it'll be that middle sector which gets impacted the most. And that's the scary part. I think that's really quite a threat, if you like, to society, normal society as we know it today. So if anybody coming out of college depends on what your role is. Of course, if you're going to be a doctor, no, you will still be a doctor, but you might use AI technology to support you and help you in a diagnosis. If you're an architect, you have to still do architecture engagement with people,
Right.
but you might get some help in the background to do some designs or come up with multiple designs. So AI will be a supporting role in that area. Dare I say it, probably engineers might find themselves a bit tricky because things can be designed, through that, because it's very much a mathematical process. I think it's a difficult question to answer directly, but that evolution of automation, that can't happen by AI. That has to happen with people as well. So my youngest is currently doing architecture, and he sort of says he doesn't want to be an architect. He wants to be an industrial designer. He wants to go to industrial design, which is really quite interesting. And I think he would be very good at it because he's very hands-on as well. But I think anything where there is a design involved, it still needs that human input, doesn't it? It still needs somebody to make a judgment call as, does it look right or does it look not right? In the same way you look at an AI written piece of paragraph, does it read right or doesn't it read right? You need to still go in and do that fine tuning. So you genuinely can't depend on ChatGPT and AI technologies to do everything for you. You have to have the discerning ability to go in and make those changes to personalize it and stop your proposal being identical to somebody else's proposal because you put in the same parameters into the search engine. One of the things I'm really interested in, and bigger companies should be able to afford this quite easily, but smaller companies like ours might find it a bit tricky. But I'm hearing that you can get ChatGPT to reside on your own servers.
Yeah, that is what I was mentioning.
So when it does, it actually uses your original material to do it.
So it's within your boundaries. It's your own license. You use it with the right prompt. I think the crisp is in what you are putting in. So you design it for your use cases. And I have seen practical examples of it making a large impact.
And that would be really good because at the end of the day, all it's doing is it's dragging information it can get hold of.
I think when I talk about AI, it was more like a licensed version on your platform, helping your guys to improve either efficiencies or getting better at designs or proposals and so on. So it was more of that. But I mean, follow-up question to this: if somebody has to start today in AV industry, be it consulting side or the product side, what's your advice like? And how certain it is that there is a career path with all this technology coming out?
There's definitely a career path.
Right.
There's no question about that. What the career path might be today might be different in 5 years' time. The consolidation of equipment, the use of all AV technologies as an internet-based, as a network-based product is been coming for years. It's really, I did an article 7-10 years ago about it.
Right.
It's also like predicting the future, and it's here now, and it's only going to get better and better. What I think my advice would be, number one, try and specialize in something.
Right.
Okay. Pick a topic that you're really, really interested in and specialize in it and be very, very good at it, because then you are adding a layer on top that others don't have. And, people will always demand that, particularly the top end of the market will always demand some specialization. So that's the first thing. So aside of the specialization and find something you're good at, also try and see if you can match that with a passion. Okay. And if you're into music, or if you're into video, or if you're into editing, or if you're into lighting or into sound, try and find something that you're passionate about that you can then apply as a specialization within the industry and make that work.
Yeah.
I would suggest that consulting is a difficult piece of work. You spend more time as a consultant actually managing client expectations. So there's a difference between consulting and designing. So most consultants have got designers in their business, as we have. Consulting is not designing. Consulting is about asking questions.
Right.
Okay. And asking probing questions and getting the answers and teasing, getting people to think a little bit more. So that's what proper consulting is about. And at the output of that initial consultation process is, right, now we know what they want, so we can design the system to meet what they need. So it flows down to design. So the other thing that I also feel is that the dilution of core AV services. So I'm talking about video and audio.
Right.
Video we see, audio we hear. Okay, the analog properties at the end of the day. If you are able to specialize and understand the nuances of video and the nuances of audio.
Right.
So what makes something sound nice? What microphone do you choose? Where do you put it? Why do you put it there? How does it work? How many times do you go into meeting rooms and they go, yep, everything's really good. The person on the other end is, I really can't hear what you're saying. Two people talking at once. It's the system isn't working because the wrong microphone's been put in, or because they put something in that the manufacturer said would do the job, but it doesn't do the job, but that doesn't matter because the manufacturer's got a sales. So having that ability to be discerning and understanding how sound works in a room or how video works in a room, that's the sort of thing that needs to be bolted on top of this general layer of transporting AV signals over networks. So you've got that sort of side of it, which requires skills in its own right, but you need to plug in, you need to go to a large meeting room and go, in this large meeting room, one microphone on the wall by the screen is not going to cover this room.
Right.
Okay. And you need to know why that is the case. You need to be able to articulate it to clients. So my advice is, if you're going to get into the AV industry, please specialize in something, and please be really good at it. And try not to specialize in everything because you'll never be good at any of it. And ISE in Barcelona, used to be in Amsterdam, ISE in Barcelona is just enormous. It's so big, I didn't have time to get around even half of it.
Right.
And that's a reflection of the size of the industry as well. We're branching out into all sorts of areas and all sorts of workflows and knowledge area. We're overlapping with IT a lot. We overlap with interior design and architecture. We're in a public space, we're in a private space, we're in restaurants and bars, we're in very confidential boardrooms. So the broadness of the AV world, could be performing arts and theatre, or it could be television and broadcast. It's really, really broad. And what I think really helps is to find somebody that specializes in an area. And, we know it here, if you're very good on sound, you know the microphone, you know how it works, you're not going to get distortion, you're not going to get clipping, you're going to be able to edit it, you're going to do this.
Right.
But it's missing. It does get missed.
Right. It makes so much sense, Peter, and we all can see the experience you bring onto the table, right? It's been a journey in itself. I'm going to put the LinkedIn link for everyone, so if they want to contact you. But I really appreciate you taking time out from your visit. Really appreciate it. Really, thank you.
No problem. Thank you for having me
on the platform.
Be good. Excellent.